My guest today is Elizabeth Nickson.
I was working in London and New York as a journalist, and I was writing for some pretty elevated people. I was on staff at Time Inc., and I'd started writing for operations like Harper's Magazine and the Sunday Times Magazine. And I needed actually to come home and look after my mother when my father died. I bought a piece of land on Salt Spring Island near where they lived. And I decided what I would do is I would build a house on it. And then I had to find something to write about. So I learned about the environmental movement because everybody was after me because I was writing for the Globe and Mail and Harper's and so on, and telling me about this wonderful thing. I mean, I was a city girl, so I knew nothing. So I listened to it. I interviewed everybody. I did a piece for Harper's about the island called Where the Bee Sucks. And like a good journalist, a trained journalist, I started to ask questions, and I started to ask people on the other side of the argument what was going on. And what I found was not good. And at the time, I was a weekly columnist, first for the Globe and Mail and then for the National Post in Canada, and I started writing about it. When the Harper's piece was published, all hell broke loose. I was attacked, I was harassed, I was threatened, I was criticized in the local newspapers. They tried to get me fired over and over and over again. That only made me more curious, because why would anybody bother with me? I was so unimportant in the scheme of things. And over time, what that led to was a deep curiosity about whether what was happening here was happening in other parts of the world, specifically the States, what was happening to our resources. These people were clearly so powerful and so fanatic that they would do literally anything to shut down everything they could. And that was the genesis of Eco Fascists. At one point, I decided to subdivide my 30-acre forest in half and sell the house with the view and build a new green, carbon neutral, rammed earth house. And at that time, in order to do that, I had to deeply engage with the regulatory system that had been set up by the green regime, which was deeply embedded here. And I found, while doing deep research on that, that all of their templates came from the United Nations and could be sourced directly back through various planning associations to the UN. And that this template, which was put in place on my island, was everywhere. Everywhere that had a valuable resource, that was a beauty spot, that they wanted in their system. I imagine most of your listeners have seen the biodiversity map that was issued by Michael Kaufman about 15 years ago, which shows that what they want for the United States is people clustered around very tightly controlled nodes, and the rest of the land be left to no-touch regulation. Now, in my region, we have the biggest industrial forest in the world. I mean, Russia may be competitive, but British Columbia is massive and heavily forested and wet. So the trees grow fast, and they have been paying since my great-grandparents settled here in 1870 for all of the social welfare, including universities, including health. And what happened here was that they decided to shut it down. And they started in 1986, and by the time I arrived here, 20 years later, it was ruined. The forests were regulated. I went to speak to the premier and his chief, one of his chief regulators in the forest. The forestry regulations stood 6 feet high. 6 feet high. And nobody could do anything. So getting a tree cut down cost more than the tree was worth, which was, as I found out over 10 years of talking to foresters, to ranchers, to farmers, to miners, that this was deliberate. It was to make the price of resources and the cost of accessing them so high that they would be left alone. During this period, I met two researchers who are quite well known out here. And one of them, Vivian Krause, discovered through this researcher who helped me as well, that international environmental organizations had spent over $300 million over 10 years to persuade people that the forest needed to be left alone, that they were absorbing carbon, and it was not good to cut down trees for a whole bunch of absolutely ridiculous reasons. At which point I had to get myself familiar with the science. And I had a wonderful guide, a forest physiologist who'd worked in the forest for years, and the whole notion of endangered species had to be looked at. The whole issue of arthropods in the soil, the whole ball of wax, which has all been used to propagandize what I think of as silly women with too much time on their hands, who become hysterical and who populate these meetings all over my region. From Northern California up to Alaska. They are an activist army, and they behave. I was early on. I was involved in trying to save a park, which I actually use every day. I'm not saying that all of this is 100% wrong. It starts out with a solid reason, but behind it is, I've come to think, as pure evil. So what these people have is they have phone trees, and they will activate anywhere from 20 to 2,000 people to mob any development at all whatsoever, even if it's a working class farm family trying to split off 5 acres to give to a disabled or elderly parent. They won't even allow that. They won't allow cabins for seasonal workers. They won't allow hotels. They won't allow resorts, no matter how tasteful. There are no restaurants that can live through the winter because they've managed to age the island. So our average age is around 70. There are very few kids being raised on the island because nobody can get a job because there's no economy. And this place where I live is a model for everywhere in the world. It's a test case. Even the California Coastal Commission was modeled on the governing body of our islands up here, which are much like the San Juan Islands. They're the same archipelago. I've been down to the San Juans. They struggle under the same regime, but they're better at fighting it because they're Americans, and Canadians are a passive race. So how about that?
Excellent introduction. I'm just looking up, you drove 20,000 miles, it says here, through rural America, looking at some of the issues throughout America, right?
Yeah, it was fabulous. I mean, it was the best holiday. I would trade it against 10 years in Tuscany. It was fabulous.
And you just saw tons, didn't you, of real world implications of this eco-fascism as you did this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the country outside of Montreal, and I planned to come back as soon as I could afford it and be able to write and make a living and write for good publishers, not, sort of amateur local publishers, and make a decent living. So I grew up in country ways. So when I was driving through, I started in Northern Ontario. When I was at time, I went on a few canoe trips up into Northern Ontario, and I looked around. It was desolate. And why was it desolate? Why were the only new buildings government buildings? And why were all the towns broken down and ruined and all the houses sad? And I didn't understand it, and I kind of filed it away. But when I drove through America, I started, I think my first trip was Eastern Washington State, which is the forestry capital of the U.S. because the trees there, I mean, it's a magical, enchanted fairy forest region, and it has been destroyed by environmentalists. So I discovered when I went there, and I spent I guess at least 10 days, and I tend to try to live with people who are in the battle rather than stay in a hotel. And so I met, maybe 50 or 100 people who were the mayors, the head of the Farm Bureau, the head of the county attorney, the man who ran various sawmills, everybody that was engaged in the economic life of those counties. And every single person said, I said, so what? They would say, we're dying. So I would walk into the mayor's office, and she would be a she. And no, she was the mayor because nobody wanted to be the mayor. So she was the mayor because nobody wanted to run against her. And I'd sit down and I say, so tell me what's going on in your county. And she would say, we are dying. We are dying. And the reason that they were dying is that people like the Nature Conservancy of the States, which is a massively powerful operation worth billions and billions of dollars, who own, I would say, 300 million acres in the U.S. of very, 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 very valuable land, which they have mothballed. And let me just as an aside tell you that mothballed land degrades. The land needs people. It has to have people in it, caring for it. Anyway, that's what every forester, farmer, rancher told me. And it's true. I mean, I grew up in the country. I know it's true. Anyway, so she would say we are dying. And what had happened, what killed them was young activists sent into their region whose primary purpose was to shutter the county. And what they would do is they would join and it's happened here. We've got people here from all over the bloody world, and they're all being paid little bits of money to stop any economic development. So what these people would do is they'd join the 4-H club, and they'd volunteer at all the functions, and they'd start a knitting club, and they'd start a organic garden. And over time, they would just, because they were paid, their volunteer labor became very, very important, because these people who live in are used to everybody leaving. All the young kids leave because the counties are dying. So they have young kids, and these young kids wanted to do everything. And eventually, over time, what they did was they introduced one regulatory structure after another, which were sold as a way of improving the resource, the water course, the hunting grounds, the forest, and they would start. And over time, what would happen is people would sell off, and it would be kind of a margins thing. Anybody on the margins, the economic sort of shaky ground, would give up, and they'd go into the cities. And that would, again, economic collapse is a fascinating study, and I don't think anybody does it properly. But what I observed was that once you overregulate something like a duck hunting ground, where people have been going for 100 years to shoot ducks, and they're under Ducks Unlimited, and then Ducks Unlimited gets infiltrated by activists, and they say, well, we should be doing this, and and here's this new science, and so the hunting ground becomes smaller, and the access becomes narrower, and eventually people just stop. And then what happens is the marsh starts to degrade because the people, because they were keeping that hunting ground rich, were making sure that it was healthy. So for instance, I interviewed a member of the Legislative Assembly in Washington State who said, and he ran cattle, and people would come and say, "You need to give back and he said, I'm running a cattle ranch. I feed people. I feed people." And he would take these idiots, and they were always these. I mean, I cannot sit in a room with an environmentalist now. They disgust me so hard, and they are so stupid and so cruel and so they have no empathy. I think they're sociopaths. Anyway, we would take these characters out to a thing that the World Wildlife Fund, which is the overarching granddaddy of ecofascism, and he'd show them this property that had been beautiful and fertile and growing and green, and it was just tumbleweed and the dirt had been desiccated because nobody had cleared the land, and it just had grown into a giant pile of weed. It had been destroyed. And that's what's happening to the forest. So up in eastern Washington State, they used to run cattle and sheep into the forest. They would crop the brush and eat it, and that would prevent fire ladders from growing up on the trees. And then the foresters would clear enough new trees in order to the other new trees could grow. But now, because you can't touch the forest and there's no cattle and sheep allowed in the forest, the forests are like a tinderbox, and it's like a whole bunch of tiny little carrots growing up everywhere. And those little trees, they pull all the nutrients out of the soil and all the water out of the soil, and it dries the land all the way around it. And all they need is a lightning strike, and boom, boom. That's what happens, and that's what happens every single summer in the West, and of course in the North and in the East now, because as the longer this regulation sits on the books, the more we are destroying the land that God has given us to steward.
How big of a deal was the whole spotted owl controversy in your work? Did you dig into that heavily to see how much effect that had?
Oh yeah, I mean that was fascinating. That was I actually met Dennis Hayes, who was the founder of Earth Day and who is I don't know if he still is, but for many, many years ran the Bullet Foundation. The Bullet Foundation was built on forestry money, and Hayes was the originator of the spotted owl scam. And he explained to me, before he knew who I was, how he managed to engineer it. And it was during the Clinton conference with the Chinese on the West Coast of the U.S. early on in his presidency. And everybody was on the streets because they were against, the free trade, blah, blah, blah. And it's very easy to send people out on the streets in Oregon and Washington because they're all idiots. They are the stupidest people alive. So what he did was he went to Clinton's team and he said, look, if you save the Western forest by naming the spotted owl as an endangered species, you will avoid people protesting during your meeting with the Chinese. And so they did. That's the origination, or the origin of the spotted owl thing. So the thing about the spotted owl is that it travels a lot. It's like the coho salmon. It's the same. It's the reason the coho is the reason that they use to take down 1,000 significant dams in the American West. And it's much like the spotted owl. It's found everywhere because it likes to travel. And another thing about the spotted owl is that it's small, and the barred owl likes to eat its lunch. And the barred owl has been traveling from the eastern states to the western states for the last 100 years. And it had reached critical mass, and it was one of the reasons for the spotted owl's decline. So because of that, because of the travel reach of the spotted owl, they were able to, I think they just lied. I think they just lied. They said that there should be this many spotted owl in this forest. And as far as I can tell, and I used a forest physiologist who works both for forestry companies and the government, that when they assume a species should be in this number in this area, they're basing it on nothing. There's nothing. There might be a sighting from 1933 in a field handbook written by a lady. And they will say, okay, well, that's what it should be. We've got to get it back to that. And if there were that many, and she observed that many birds, that's how stupid this is and how dangerous it is. Because the upshot of it has been just massive devastation across the Northwest. And in my region, is something I discovered last year, because for 100 years we paid for medical and university and, of course, schools with our forests. And since they've been shut down, they said, oh, well, tourism will take over. Well, you can't possibly replace tourism, forestry with tourism. So what happened was they started to allow in and not prosecute, first of all, the Chinese gangs. So they opened casinos in Vancouver and they started laundering money. And now Vancouver launders most of the drug money in North America through its casinos and through its real estate. There's a magnificent book written by a local reporter about this, and he goes into it in some depth. His name is Sam Cooper, and his work is one of the reasons that Trump is saying to Canada, you have to clean up your fentanyl mess, because we have four factories all over British Columbia making fentanyl. And that's how the government has made enough money to pay for our universities and pay for our healthcare, because they shut down the most productive industrial forest in the world on a stupid, ill-advised scientific experiment. And so that's the thing that really that I discovered in the last maybe 18 months that was so distressing. And you know, because we've got a Green Prime Minister now, followed by, you know, we had 10 years of Justin Trudeau, and now we've got somebody who's a banker who's a Green. They're trying to say, oh, we're going to develop our resources and we're going to what happens is that when you try to do it the way Mark Carney is planning to do it, developing the resource costs extreme amounts of money, which the government pays for in collaboration with someone in the private sector. Now, this is happening all over the world, so I'm going to explain it this way. My son-in-law works for the World Bank, and he had a long-time project in Tanzania, and they were, as a condition of the loan of the World Bank to Tanzania, or whatever they call it now, he had to build 37 infrastructure projects. And he explains it like, okay, I'm building a bus shelter. The government pays for half and a local businessman pays for half. But he said, and you know, he was all in on green regulation until he realized what it was doing, that the green regulation made the building of the bus stop so expensive that the government couldn't afford to do it. And the private sector said, I'm out. So what happens is that the Chinese moved in and said, we'll take care of it. We'll pay for it all. Don't worry about it. We'll do it. and then they take a piece of the country. Okay? So whatever they ask for, they get. We'll just have that in mind. And we'll pay you 10% of what we take out, but we'll take that mine, okay? Because we're going to pay for this great bus shelter. Basically, it could be a local hospital, it could be a local school, it could be an entire science department on a university, but the Chinese pay for it and then they take something. And he said and he was green, right? He called himself an environmental economist, and he does very, very well. But the regulations forced by the UN made the project unviable in the real world. So what's going to happen in Canada, because we have, I don't know, I mean, we are so resource rich, it's preposterous, that the green regulations are going to make all of these projects wildly expensive. And over time, what will happen is that the resource will be managed and owned in part by the private sector company that came in and said, oh, we'll partner with the government, no problem. And then the government says, what, you got to go this. And at least 30%, no, I'm sorry, 30% of it is valid. The rest is just payoffs to various segments of the left-wing civil service. Basically, that's what it is. And over time, those resources will be alienated from Canadians. And is that a plan? I think it's a plan. I think it's a deliberate plan that's been worked on for 50 years, 75 years. I mean, we started knowing about this in the 80s, but the Club of Rome started in the 1970s. And so if the Club of Rome started in the 1970s, they were thinking about it before. You see? So if you look at the biodiversity map, right now it follows the fire zones. And where you have a burnt out forest, there is rezoning. Where is that resource gone? Where does it go? And I think, it goes to, multinational hedge funds. That's where it goes. It goes into funds. It's owned by Larry Fink and his masters. That's where the land goes.
So from my point of view, that there's signs of hope here as the climate scam is imploding globally.
Yes.
Do you see signs of hope, or do you think we're close to peak insanity still now?
I think a lot more people are aware of it. I keep a really close eye on the videos made by ordinary people who are in local zones, and I think everybody's fit to be tied. They are the Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2050 and Agenda 2090 are all pretty well known in the sort of greater community, and people are refusing to go along with it. I mean, for instance, last week it was reported that all of the cameras that were going to measure everybody's carbon output in England have been torn down by the Blade Runners, almost all of them. So they put a camera up, it's torn down. So there is a quiet populist uprising happening, and absolutely this is part of it. Do people understand resources? No, I don't think they do. I mean, I'm just getting to the point where I can see how the big chunks of money move around and I mean and what their goals are. And I think Canada is, you don't have to go to war to take Canada. All you have to do is put some international banker in charge, and he's got it covered. So it's really happening here. And are the educated middle class aware of it? No, they are not. They have no idea. They have no idea. And are the sort of working class aware of it? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, they all know. They know what's happening. But the people that, that have the power right now, they're either ignorant or they're being paid, because it's good money. It's good. There's good money in green now, really good money.
I heard you're talking on podcasts in 2024, maybe about a year ago, you were optimistic about politics in Canada. But do you think Mark Carney really won that election?
No, no, not even close. But I do think that it was a beautifully done crime. I had to admire how well it was Luciferian. It was so well done. It was deeply depressing for us, that election. All my friends, Jamie and I, were just desolate. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here. I really don't. I really don't, because they jailed and were so brutal with the truckers' convoy. People are afraid. They are afraid here. They're afraid to speak up. One of the journalists writing in my vein about Canada, they were sued last week by the Carney government for misinformation during the campaign. So another woman who writes for Substack, who has fewer followers than me, she was debanked. So it's if you're writing exclusively about Canada up here, you're being watched, and if they can find something to stop you, they will. For instance, the lawyer that's head up the Canadian Constitution Foundation, who was behind all of the defense for the truckers, was disbarred 2 days ago. So, that's not good. That's really not good. So we're hoping that Trump just to Carney, because otherwise he's got a problem on his hands. The Americans have a problem because all the drugs are now coming through us. That was discovered this week too. All the drugs going in, they've just gone all the way up, and they're going through Port of Vancouver and down across our 3,000-mile border into the States. Yeah.
Is there a move afoot to clean up elections in Canada?
Nope, there's nobody. There's one group in, because our British Columbia election was stolen too. I mean, it came down to 23 seats almost. And there's one group that is working on it, and they know what happened, but they're inarticulate. So I'm going to try. It's on my list to try to clarify what they've discovered. In Canada, there are several groups working on that stolen election, but again, you have to be so careful, Tom. It's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. I don't want to be audited. I don't want to spend any time in jail. They would. There's no problem. They'd march in here and take me down to the RCMP detachment and lock me up for a couple of days, just for the sheer hell of it. So, yeah, I don't know. Anybody's guess.
So one reason that you and your work fascinates me so much is that you've seen the belly of the beast, the mainstream journalism. You were all in on mainstream journalism. I heard you say that there was a time when you wanted to interview somebody, that you had a chef and a butler, and people.
Yeah. That was great. It was like 4 years of bliss, and I used to order crates of champagne to give out to my friends. Yeah, that was at Life magazine in London. We had a building on Bond Street in the heart of Mayfair, and we had Henry Moore statues everywhere. And yeah, there was a kitchen and a butler and it was very useful because people would come because Life magazine for the Brits at that time was still very alive. It had published a lot about their problems or the struggles that they had gone through, and they highlighted a lot of British heroes and heroines and so on during the war. So everybody would come, and I would hear one princess say to another, do you know why we're here? She would go, no, I don't. I have no
So I just wanted to check here. It says online that you've interviewed figures like Nelson Mandela, Margaret Thatcher, and the Dalai Lama. Is that true?
Of course it's true. I'm sure I have a picture of me with Nelson somewhere, but I don't have trophy shots. Yeah, it was easy to get interviews when you're working for an organization like that, which at the time was the best in the world, in that it had the most financing and the most bureaus all over the world, and was known so well. So of course, people would immediately say yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How did those interviews go then? Were they lengthy interviews? I'm just curious how the whole thing would play out.
Well, when I first started, they would just give me lists of questions and say, so-and-so just won the Nobel Prize for Physics. Here, go interview them. And then, I failed first year math at McGill. And then they would send me up when they'd found bodies up on the moors to doorstep families. That was really fun. But eventually, I just got very good at interviewing because I am an empath. So I would be able to determine how the interview subject was feeling, and then they would trust me. And so the interviews didn't hurt, but they were often quite good. Thatcher, I spent 5 hours with her at Downing Street. I can't believe I didn't get a picture. It was for a cover story for Life, and she liked the photographer very much. He was a very attractive working class fellow, and they had been flirting for years, because he would, be in the photo pool around her, and so she did 5 outfits, and I just trailed after. She made me tea in the flat upstairs in Downing Street, and she scolded me for wearing black shoes with a navy blue suit. And anyway, yeah, she was terrific, and she was very warm. I mean, I'm sure politicians turn it on, but everybody seemed to really love her who worked around her. I mean, we started out on the main floor in her offices and so on, and when she showed me around, and all the people around her really liked her. I know she's thought of as cold, and I had thought of her as cold. But she was exactly the opposite. She was like a very smart mother, the kind of mother you don't want to mess with. Very perceptive mother. And the Dalai Lama, it was at one of the houses near the Grosvenor Hotel, I think, that they own, that they rent to heads of state. And he was surrounded by about 30 monks. And that was also very sweet. He kept poking me in the side and telling me to smile more. So I was pretty young, so I guess I was a bit scared too. So he was great too, and he would like actually tickling me. And who was the other? Oh, Nelson. So I spent 3 weeks in his back garden after he was released, and I got that interview actually just because we'd heard that he and Winnie had been writing letters to each other, and he had hidden them in the rocks of the wall around Robben Island, and somebody would fetch them and take them to Winnie and bring back. So I wanted to publish those letters in Life magazine, And so eventually what happened was his lawyer turned up and said, and offered me the rights to his autobiography for, I think it was $15 million, which at the time was an insane amount of money. But so we negotiated for 6 months, and because we all kind of suspected that they were going to release him. And so he basically had said yes. And I flew down just before he was released, and we had 5 photographers on the story. And I just sat and waited for him to see me. And the publisher for his autobiography was Bill Phillips, who at the time was editor-in-chief of Little Brown in New York. And he came down and we talked to him together, and it was just like a done deal. And the whole publishing world was just infuriated. Like, who the hell is Elizabeth Nickson? How the hell did she do that? God damn it. But yeah, so that's how that happened.
So when you were interviewing people like that, was everything super tightly controlled in a certain list of questions you could not ask, and then heavily edited afterward, and a lot of off the record conversation, anything like that?
No. But I wasn't doing hard-nosed political interviews really and interestingly in the case of Mandela, they kept asking back in New York, they said, "Would just try to get something about how he felt." And I would ask him that, and he did not have those words at that time. He did not have a personal sense of himself as an emotional being. I think he was just in endurance and stoicism. And also, he would try to move the conversation from him to us. So, because he was a Marxist, right? So it was the collective that was important. The other people that he had fought with had to be included, and that it was their opinion, not his, right? So that was tricky. I would keep circling back and asking the question in about, I would say, half a dozen different ways, and every single time he evaded that. Clearly, during his ghostwriter became the editor of Time, and now was Barack Obama's censor. He was shocking. He learned how to, but he was just out, right? He was just out. He was like, "I've been in prison for 30 years, ma'am. What do you mean, feel? What is this feeling thing? I did not see Oprah ever." He was charming.
So, I'm going to read a little bit more about your background. I have here that in addition to your work at Time, you became European bureau chief at Life, and then you wrote for Harper's Magazine, The Guardian, The Observer, The Independent, The Sunday Telegraph, The Sunday Times, The Telegraph, The Globe and Mail, and The National Post. So you kind of wrote for everybody at one time or another.
Yeah. I was looking for somebody who would let me do exactly what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I mean, I was just, and I would sell a story and sort of try out the editor and see how difficult it was to work for them. But it was fun. It was fun. It was like an athletic challenge.
So then you did all that, and then you became an author, and then of books, and then Substack, right? This whole new world. You're able to write about anything you want at any length you want on Substack. What's that?
That's heaven.
Yeah.
That's the best. And I mean, I did have editors for 25 years. So I tried to get the best editors I could. And I did. I worked with some great editors. So I have those skills. I've learned from them how to keep people's attention and all the skills. Yeah.
I think I heard you say in a podcast that at one point you had 5 editors or 5 people were going over your stuff to fact check it. Did that drive you crazy that they were cutting out stuff you wanted to say, or how did that work out?
It's like I had a choice. I mean, my first piece in Domestic Time under my byline, I had not written a single word. Somebody had taken my reporting and written it and then affixed my name to it as a treat. They decided to get, because Luce wanted people in the field to only report, because they would get, if they wrote, they would get too close to their subjects. They would get, sympathize. And so they wanted everybody in New York to do the writing, right? So you would file 25,000 words of interviews and reporting and so on, and they would make it into a piece. So that's how it ran. And when a piece would go through the editing process, it was 5 editors, and it would be sent back to you every time. And they say, what about this? Could you check this? We don't believe this. Is this true? 5 times.
Did the news have a huge left-wing bent even then, or is it much worse?
No. It was, I would say it was just centrist, and it was, America was exceptional. It was the greatest country on earth, and that was all criticism of the states was really not allowed, not in any real way. You could write critical stories, but it all, at Time Inc., it all moved back to supporting the idea of America, which at the time I was more left wing than they were. And every other paper was much the same. It wasn't, now we're having fundamental discussions about whether this is right or wrong. There were no fundamental discussions. What was happening was Britain was great, America was great, Canada was great, everybody is great. We're going to write around that. We're going to report around that. Now we're saying, what is going on for real? Like, none of the things that I told you about the forests or the land could be published in today's mainstream media. No matter how much data I have, no. That is a fundamental insult to what's going on now. They can't tolerate it, which is why the forests are burning, because nobody knows. So
what do you think happened to the mainstream media? Like, did they just lurch left recently, or what was the timeline here where they went nuts?
I think the globalist program stepped up and became imperative. I don't know why. I mean, I don't really understand that. As far as the papers go, as the digital world started to grow, their readership and subscriptions dropped, and their advertising dropped. So they became available for purchase. And so hedge funds purchased them, various oligarchs, and then they were driven in a certain direction so the newspaper was no longer supported by its readers, right? Yep. So the readers were now being propagandized by the owners. When Jamie and I, because Jamie started in newspapers, you were writing for the people that you lived among. If it was a city newspaper, you were writing for the people who worked and lived in Vancouver. But now they don't pay for it because they're reading digital. All the readers have gone there. They really have. Anybody who wants to pay for anything goes there. So the Globe and Mail, when I was writing for it, I think they had 300,000 subscribers, and that kept them going. And then that started to drop precipitously. So what happened was that they now have 1 million subscribers in government. So government buys subscriptions. Oh, well, who are they writing for? They're writing for the government. So that's what happened. That's what happened.
So it sounds like you do have a hope, or you're happy about the rise of the new media, about your Substack. I'm looking at Welcome to Absurdistan, where you can say anything you want. And you're able to do the podcasts and social media. All of that gives you hope, I hope, doesn't it?
Yeah, and nobody's come at me yet. Nobody's tried to shut me down. But yeah, I think new media is going to change the world. I think it's going to change the world because everybody is welcome. So this whole, Europe is going to be on the streets this weekend. The UK is going to blow up. That was started by new media. And when I mean new media, I mean Instagram and TikTok and Rumble and YouTube. All of these random citizens have a voice now, and they're angry. And they can make 60-second videos that are very powerful, and they are watched by hundreds of thousands of people, and they activate hundreds of thousands, and you can't stop them. There's just too many of them. So that is going to change the world.
Do you think there will be an attempt to use digital ID to protect our children, so that we have to have an ID to post anything, and then if they don't like what you post, they turn the switch off? How worried are you about that?
I'm worried. I don't think that the globalist cabal has given up. I think they want to trade us like widgets. And the more they know, the more they can sell our data. And it's an economic plan. It's an economic plan. I mean, people are against it. We just don't know quite how to stop it yet. And when I say we, I mean me and the millions of other people who are worried about it. So if millions of people are worried about it, and that's certainly true, if you look at the number of people who watch these videos, there will be a way found to stop it, I think. I hope. I'm not sure about that yet.
I think I heard you say that even in your region there, that quite a few people, maybe 10%, are awake and they understand what's really going on, and a huge percentage of people are just kind of out of it, and maybe they never will understand. Does that sound right?
Yeah, well, Canadians are pretty passive. I'm an American by heritage, so I've worked out of the country for a long time. So I look at my fellow citizens, I just want to slap them awake. It's crazy. I know it's like a magic spell has been set on the country and made us silly, not fully aware of ourselves as individuals. It may be the whole idea of healthcare, that you don't have to pay for it. But in fact, what happens is that everybody pays on average about $15,000 a year in taxes for our healthcare. But you see, that means that if you're marginal, you get the same, in theory, healthcare as everyone else. So that may be something that keeps people passive. Certainly that argument has been made in Canada for many years by serious journalists, that it is a weakening of the state, of the citizen, to have that level of care. I don't know, Tom. It worries me, but I don't know really what to do about it.
Are you worried much about just a huge financial reset in the next maybe 5 years, even, where these unsustainable debts just become too much to handle?
No, I think that Trump's economic team knows what they need to do, and I think they have a lot of support, and so I'm confident about that. And I think that if people in other countries see what Trump has been able to do, that will change everything. So I'm actually 100% confident of that. I mean, barring, I don't even know if they can do anything at this point, because any sort of 9/11 COVID thing, well, everybody's going to say, well, you're just making that up to screw with us again. There's so many people that are aware of that, that are not among the educated middle class. But below that, they're all aware of it. They all are. I mean, it's what they feed on now, because nobody can watch television. It's so rubbish. So this is the thing. This is what people are talking and thinking about to my mind. And I mean working class people. And Canada is now, thanks to our government, 70% working class. They busted people back down to working class. And this is what they think about and talk about.
Is there someone else who could be the Trump of Canada that you can name yet?
Not so far. Not so far. Nobody's strong enough.
Okay, we're coming up on an hour here. Any other points you want to make before we go ahead and finish up?
No, you've given me free rein. I've said everything I have to say.
You did it fast.
I don't even know what to say. I won't be able to talk for 2 days now.
Okay, we will wrap up then. Thanks a lot. I'm a big fan of your work, and I hope to have you on again. Elizabeth Nickson.
It was a great pleasure.
Thanks.
Great pleasure.